Now, friends, during this first segment, we're going to be thinking about opening our minds to prosperity. Some of you know the story of how these seminars began, but I'd like to review the experience that we've had in these with you. In 1958, one of the most severe recessions since World War II hit this country. And I was living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time. And of course that area was hard hit by the recession because it was an industrial city and it was dependent upon its steel mills, which had been hard hit by the recession. And so thousands of people were out of work and were jobless in that area as they were all over the country. And finally, Birmingham was declared a disaster area. Federal aid had been provided for the people in the bread lines. Everyone was talking hard times and lack. Everyone was in a discouraged, depressed state of mind. And it was at this point that I was asked to teach a prosperity class by a group of business and professional people in the city. Now, I had been researching out the laws of prosperity for a long time. Even then, I'd been trying to figure out just what they were. And I'm sure that I had the experience that many of you have had. I searched the bookshelves trying to find one book that would give me the simple 1, 2, 3 steps to prosperity. And I could not find these ideas in any one book. I found many marvelous ideas in many books. Nevertheless, we began to meet once a week to study the subject of prosperity together and to develop the laws of prosperity. Now, our basic idea and the basic theme of that prosperity class was this: turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty, and you will have plenty, regardless of what people about you are saying or doing. It's a great success philosophy in this one statement. Turn the great energy of your thinking upon ideas of plenty, and you will have plenty, regardless of what people about you are doing or saying. And so we began to do this in that class, and we were amazed how quickly it worked. Within 1 week from the time that people in that class began to turn the great energy of their thinking upon ideas of plenty, they got results. Now, in this book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, we've talked about all of the things that happened in that class. 2 secretaries received raises in pay the first week. A stockbroker had had a very low income because, of course, the market was low. Right away, a client that he had not seen in several years walked into his office, handed him a check for $200,000 to be invested. Now, that stockbroker's income the first month after we started that prosperity class there was 4 times what it had been in the past. Several businessmen began to collect money that was owed them right in the midst of the recession. A lawyer's clients began to pay him. One saleswoman was employed by a store that had 100 employees. They had all been hard hit by the recession. After she began attending that prosperity class, she was the only employee in that store to receive a commission check at the end of the month because she was the only one that had made enough sales. A construction engineer went from $1.5 million construction job that he was on in Alabama to a $15.5 million construction job in the Midwest before the end of the class was over. This was a 12-week class. A housewife won an all-expense-paid trip abroad. One couple in the class received an unexpected inheritance running into thousands of dollars. One man's heart condition disappeared. A widow of 20 years remarried happily. Several marriages were saved. One couple that had been divorced even remarried again. At least 2 people became millionaires as a result of that class. Now, we found that all kinds of things happened. There was increased health, there was increased wealth, there was increased happiness, there was increased peace of mind. The thing I noticed the most was that whereas the people had been depressed and discouraged at the beginning of that class, they seemed to blossom forth with a new look as the class progressed. They gained a new lease on life. It was an amazing thing to watch. The results of that class were so gratifying that the people in it asked me to write a book on prosperity. And I hesitated because at that time I'd written articles, but I had no experience in writing books. And I did not feel that I had the time either. But when I hesitated, a businessman in the class suggested that he begin meeting with me every day and that we meditate upon these ideas together, talk about them, and just let them expand. And so as we began to meet every day and meditate upon these ideas of prosperity, the whole format for this book developed to me in meditation and just in thinking about it. Now, a stockbroker in the class named this book The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. And then it was a public relations man in that class who found the literary agent who found the publisher for the book. Now, not only was I surprised how fast the people in that prosperity class got results, but I was also startled by what happened to the people who worked closely with me while I was writing the book later. And some of you know this story because I've talked about it in some of my books. I employed a secretary who worked with me on the outline in the first half of this book. She was typing it. And when she had finished one half of the book, she came into my office one day and she said, "I'm resigning." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing's wrong. That's the reason I'm resigning. I don't need this job anymore. I've been using the ideas in this book and they've worked." And what had happened, her husband, her husband was a salesman and his sales had been low as a result of the recession. And so she had taken the job to get extra things that they wanted, like a second car and things for their home and so on. And after she started typing the manuscript on Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, she began to rather quietly and secretly use the ideas. And all of a sudden, her husband's income began to go up. He began to sell, and his income began to go up. And then she had several gifts come to her, and in various ways, money began to come, and suddenly she just didn't need the job anymore. They got the second car and so on. And so she resigned. And so very innocently then I employed a second secretary to help me work on the last half of this book. And she began to type it as I was working on it chapter by chapter over a period of weeks. And I vow to you, before she finished typing the last half of the book, she came into my office one day and it was like a broken record. She said, "I'm resigning." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "Well, nothing's wrong." She said, "I've been using the ideas in that manuscript and they've worked so well that I don't need this job anymore." And what had happened was her husband had been a very fine engineer in the aircraft business, and he had gotten laid off because of termination of government contracts as a result of the recession. And so she had taken this job as a stopgap until her husband could find work again. And so as she was working with the manuscript, she began to quietly use the ideas, and her husband went out and got the best job of his life in the space program. And they left the state before the manuscript was finished. Now, I had a housekeeper at home, and I was trying not to talk about the book to anyone as I was developing the material, because, you know, that's an old secret idea about success, to kind of keep quiet about it until it's worked out. And so I thought it was safe to talk to my housekeeper, though, about it. She had not attended the prosperity class. She had not seen the manuscript or any of the ideas in the book. And so I was describing these laws of prosperity to her as we were developing the manuscript chapter by chapter. And one day, I vow to you, before I got through, had finished the book, she came in to me and she said, "You know, learning about the laws of prosperity has given me the courage to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. She says, I don't really want to be a housekeeper. I really want to be a dressmaker. So I've decided to resign as your housekeeper. Now, will you employ me as your dressmaker? And so that lady became a dressmaker. She still is a very fine dressmaker in Alabama. All right. I lost 2 secretaries and a housekeeper before we could get the book finished and to the publisher. And then on the day that the book was finally published by Prentice Hall, I had a note from my editor telling me how the ideas had worked for him in a rather nice way as soon as the book came off the press. He said, an amusing thing happened a few minutes ago after I received the first copy of the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity from the printer. While I was reading through the first few pages of the book, one of the other editors here at Prentice Hall came into my office and handed me some money. I looked at him in surprise, and he reminded me that one day when he had forgotten his wallet, I had loaned him lunch money. He was now repaying it. I had completely forgotten the incident. My editor said, how's that for fast action with the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity? And so it was an interesting thing to watch these ideas work. First, for people who were very depressed and discouraged in a prosperity class during the recession, and then later for people all around who seem to touch or have contact with the manuscript in any way. And so you say, well, what are the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity? Well, I like what the stockbroker said when he explained to me why he felt we should name the book in this way. He said, you know, the word dynamic has the same root as the word dynamite. That which is dynamic is forceful. It often leads to change. And then he said, you know, a law is a rule of action that works if you work it. Prosperity includes peace, health, and plenty. And so the dynamic laws of prosperity are those inner and outer rules of action which work for us as we work them. And they can literally blast us out of limitation, you see, to bring increased peace, health, and abundance into our world.
Thank you.